Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Believe in punishment for abortion, yes or no, as a principle?
The answer is that there has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah, there has to be some form.
10 cents, 10 years.
I don't know. That I don't know. That
Why
I don't
not?
know.
And then candidate Donald Trump made those comments back in 2016. Establishment Republicans and anti-abortion activists rushed to explain that he was confused. Of course that wasn't their position.
But of course, women shouldn't be punished. I think probably Donald Trump will figure out a way to say that he didn't say it or he was misquoted or whatever. But I don't think so. I don't think that's an appropriate response.
Well, here we are 3 years later with President Trump in the Oval Office, two of his conservative nominees sitting on the Supreme Court, and members of his party in Georgia just enacted legislation that could do exactly as Trump said, punish a woman for having an abortion. Now, the formerly pro-choice Donald Trump is perhaps the most unlikely champion of the anti-abortion movement you could find in the entire country, and yet here he is on the precipice of having his court nominees achieve a decades-long goal of undoing Roe v. Wade. Joining me now to discuss what's happening with the Republican push to eliminate abortion rights, Laura Bassett, who's been covering it all as a journalist, and Caroline Fredrickson, president of the American Constitutional Society, one of the nation's leading progressive legal organizations. Laura, let me start with you. Obviously, there's been so much activism and activity around this issue in Republican states attempting to whittle away at access. This seems a newer strategy and a more sort of frontal assault. Is that what you're seeing?
Absolutely. This really, the wave of anti-abortion restrictions started in 2011 when the Tea Party swept the House after 2010. And so we've been seeing increasing amounts of abortion restrictions every year. And this year it appears to be the worst. The abortion laws are getting definitely a lot more extreme. We're seeing all-out abortion bans, or they might as well be. The one in Georgia and the one in Ohio might as well be. These 6-week bans before most women even realize they're pregnant. And I think the reason Republicans are so emboldened now, because look, this heartbeat ban, Republicans have been trying to pass this for years. Kasich, a few years ago, actually, he vetoed it because he said it was too extreme. Now it's not too extreme for Republicans anymore because Donald Trump is president and there's a conservative Supreme Court, and they think this actually could get up there to the Supreme Court and overturn Roe.
So Caroline, my understanding of the legal jurisprudence under Roe is that obviously all these things like a 6-week ban or a comprehensive ban like Alabama are just flatly against the law. They're unconstitutional. They violate Roe. What happens what is the strategy they're pursuing in terms of the legal fight here?
Well, I think clearly they kind of mistook The Handmaid's Tale for a how-to manual, but what they're trying to do is land this directly at the Supreme Court. It's sort of they did used to kind of go around it and pretend that what they were doing was just reasonable limitations when they've always been aiming at the heart of Roe. Right now, they're coming out of the darkness and doing it in broad daylight and saying that that's what they're all about. They want to overturn Roe, and they want this Supreme Court with Donald Trump's nominees to do it for them.
But I guess the question, just in a more technical sense, and maybe this is boring, but I just there's a district court. It's going to go to a district court. Someone's going to sue. It's going to go to a district court judge who's going to strike it down, and then what happens?
Well, I mean, they go to an appellate court, which also has been stacked with right-wing judges by Donald Trump. And then it's on the express train to the Supreme Court. I mean, they've indicated, and we know that that's what Justice Kavanaugh and Justice Gorsuch, they're ready and waiting. And the rest of them, have been signaling, quite obviously that that's the direction that they want to go.
Laura, do you think there's, I think among women, particularly in women who are support abortion rights and active, there's a real tangible fear that we're standing at the precipice right now. Where are we, to your mind?
I think women are terrified right now from what I'm seeing, especially over the past couple of weeks with the Georgia bill. The Georgia bill is unlike anything we've seen. And we're talking about a bill that defines abortion as murder. It would threaten women with up to life in prison or even capital punishment for an abortion. 10 years in prison for going out to a different state to have an abortion, and threatening women with jail time for even possibly a miscarriage. Now we've got an Ohio bill that's possibly banning the insurance coverage of birth control. I think women have gotten a bit complacent over the years and thinking, Roe v. Wade is set precedent, was set in the 70s, and now they're seeing, this is serious, and we don't have a Supreme Court that's going to protect us. We might actually soon be put in jail for something that used to be a common healthcare procedure.
Caroline, what do you think about where the Supreme Court is on this and whether they would take a case on this, a full frontal just challenge to Roe, something like a comprehensive ban?
Well, I think we might have thought differently until this term, but we've already seen the Supreme Court issuing some really, I think, quite radical decisions and moving in a direction that seems to contemplate going to Roe. I mean, people say that Chief Justice Roberts is very worried about the status of the court and it proceeds incrementally. But I don't think the others are there, and I'm not really sure that he's there. I mean, we've already seen that they've indications that they're ready to undo a decision they issued just a couple of years ago, which found law unconstitutional for putting some real constraints on women's access to abortion. And I think it could happen any time.
And you only need 4 votes to take the case, and then the wrangling begins. Laura Bassett and Caroline Fredrickson, thank you both for joining me.
It is Friday, the 10th of May of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Indeed, folks. Well, I want to extend a grand and wonderful and happy birthday to my mother today. She's 83. Normally, in the old school way of thinking, you would not divulge a woman's age, but she's proud of it, and so are the rest of us. So, hey, happy birthday, Ma. Well, folks, Donald Trump is, he wants to have those tariffs. I think he likes the way it sounds, the way it feels when he says tariff. He likes that because he certainly doesn't know anything about what tariffs are, but he's glorying in the fact that he's making American consumers pay a lot of money extra for everything, even toys. Now, I will confess, I have not been a big fan of, let's say, toy makers in particular. Sending, their designs off to be constructed with what I always considered to be political slave labor, and to build those things. And it could be any number of consumer items. I'm just picking out toys because I remember wanting to make a toy that was known as the alphabet train. And I wanted it to be made in wood blocks, and so I cost out everything to have this manufactured, and, how much it would cost to get the wood and have it made into blocks and stamped and, the whole deal. And I couldn't compete because everybody sent everything else over to China and Indonesia and Malaysia. And it was a fraction of what it costs to build the thing, and they were selling it for a fraction of that. I went, wow. Okay, so no wonder manufacturing jobs are leaving the country. They're not really leaving the country. They're just hiring political slave labor elsewhere. So Trump's idea of tariffs just made me realize that, and I'm not the first one who has brought this up, but it takes a particular business acumen to lose over $1 billion. It really does. I mean, you have to really not know what you're doing. If you knew what you're doing just a little bit, you might not lose $1 billion. So it takes a really, really specific and a profound business acumen to be able to achieve that. Some people would say it is lacking any business acumen, but I'm being, generous and saying, yeah, well, it's a pretty much a specific business acumen that gets you to lose $1 billion. I think maybe part of it is that Daddy always came to the rescue. And when Daddy was coming to the rescue, these kids were scamming Dad too. And maybe Dad liked it. Maybe Dad sat around and said, oh, yeah, I've got a bunch of Fagans as kids. Oh, they're going to go far in life. Isn't America grand? Okay. Once upon a time in America, folks. Once upon a time in America. What's on the rest of the menu today here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Oh, I should mention the French 77s are, ready to be poured, so do virtually imbibe. We insist. Well, Republicans are taking Trump's advice and doubling down on punishing women for abortion, as was broken down at the top there on Inners. And what are we doing? I know what we're doing. We're fending off another attack on Roe v. Wade because they want it to go to the Supreme Court. Okay. I have my suspicions about what this is all about, but this has been going on since before I got out of high school. On the rest of the menu, after enduring death threats from rabid NRA fans, the NRA urged its supporters to harass gun safety activist Shannon Watts even more. That's how craven they are. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy whined how hard it is to live on $174,000 a year. And this is not too long after he got into an argument with a Democrat about the minimum wage. Letting people have a minimum wage is just giving them a leg up too far. And Trump said John Kerry should be prosecuted under the Logan Act. But Kerry isn't having it. After the break, we move to the chef's table where corrupt Brazilian lawmakers dealt a blow to the country's graft-busting Justice Minister Sergio Moro. And a second Venezuelan opposition lawmaker seeks refuge in the Italian embassy in Caracas. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice the chat room link at the rightish of the page, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link for the Patreon link. And I should mention here also that some people on iPads and those types of machines have been having trouble accessing the homepage, and we had a fix by putting an S at the HTTPS, And then, HTTP, add that S to make it secure, HTTPS. But people are still having problems getting the portal for the player to load. And I got some information from another listener and friend last night that it was kind of hard to get that Patreon link happening. So we'll look into that and find out what the heck is going on. But if you could become a recurring Patreon to Netroots Radio, your contribution goes a long way to not only helping us pay our bills, but we are saving money to buy new machinery, or newer machinery. These machines have been going for quite a while now. Netroots Radio is celebrating its 8th anniversary this year, indeed. And that's a 24/7, 365 broadcast resistance, as the founders originally intended, because, look, we're just exercising our First Amendment rights. Yes, we are. So thank you for your generosity in helping us continue that. And you are our biggest contributor, and thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio, do so at Netroots Radio on Twitter, of course. And Tom takes care of that, among other things. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. And then I get the links on social media up also around then. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and of course wherever fine podcasts can be found, mixed in with all the rest of us that aren't so fine, but we're there. All right, enough of that. Rudy Giuliani is going to the Ukraine. Isn't it great how these people's mind works? They get caught really consorting with a hostile foreign power to really muck up America. Not just our elections, but the whole of America for short-term greed at the best. And now those people have been caught with their proverbial hands in the cookie jar. So what do? Well, you used information from a foreign power. Yeah, they weren't hostile. They were called the Brits and the Australians. My God. And why did they tell us? Because it was happening to them too. So Rudy's going to go to the Ukraine to dig up dirt on Biden? Does he really need to go to the Ukraine for Oppo research? They're throwing it in our faces. They're gaslighting us. They're moving the goalposts. Constitutional crisis. I don't think that adequately describes it. I really don't. Well, let's get back into what we have curated for you today, because there's so much out there that's uncurated. We would be deluged with chaos, and that's the whole point. So let's hone in on this article by Oliver Willis out of Share Blue Media. The NRA encouraged its rabid supporters to harass gun safety activist Shannon Watts, even after she'd already received death threats from NRA fans. Watts, the founder of the gun violence prevention group Moms Demand Action and a mother of 5, criticized the gun extremists at the NRA on Tuesday after the organization praised itself for opposing bans on armor-piercing ammunition. Shoot cops with armor-piercing ammunition. God, I don't know. And they're happy about that. I wonder how the cops feel. I really do. In response, a day later, the NRA encouraged its supporters to flood Watts' social media accounts with negative comments. And a negative comment to an NRA fan, usually involves the threat of Second Amendment remedies. Now, I wouldn't mind having some Second Amendment remedies, like a well-regulated militia, and take the guns out of these idiots' hands. You might get what you wish for if you're not careful. This led to a series of death threats, which Watts documented. "I hope your kids all get shot dead," one NRA supporter wrote. "Have fun protecting yourself with a bat or a knife. I'll be sure to not be at your funeral," wrote another. And one person detailed a violent rape, torture, and murder fantasy about Watts and her family. I should add here that Shannon Watts and Moms Demand Action have been harassed in the most vile and violent ways since she first started this group. Remember when they had a protest? I believe it might have been in Texas. Correct me if I'm wrong. I apologize, but that was when you saw a line of armed idiots at this mall where Moms Demand Action was having their little protest with their signs. They had kids with them, right? And so there was about a dozen of these guys that came out with these high-powered military-grade weapons to harass them. So this has been going on for a long time, and now has escalated to the point where the NRA is saying, "Oh, you caught us laundering rubles? Well, Night of the Long Knives. Kristallnacht, mofo." I'm sure that's what they're thinking deep down in their soul. Watts posted the threats and tagged the NRA so the group could see what his actions had prompted. She then, understandably, began removing the hateful comments on her Instagram posts. Well, instead of being chastened, the NRA poured gasoline on the fire. "Shannon Watts doesn't only hate the Second Amendment, but she despises the first two," the NRA taunted. "That is why she's been deleting all of your thoughtful comments, because she can't handle the truth." So then the NRA put out the hashtag "sorry, not sorry." This was followed up by yet another taunting post that refused to acknowledge or condemn the death threats the NRA had helped incite. Well, the NRA said that Watts disabled comments on Instagram because she couldn't handle the facts. "I disabled the comments after receiving several dozen death threats against me and my children," Watts wrote in response to the avalanche of bile. The NRA is weaker than it's ever been, and it's no wonder that its leaders are trying to create distractions from their own scandals. Their decision to make their number one enemy a middle-aged mom is an interesting choice, but then again, so is refusing to heed the desire of a majority of Americans, and even their own members, for common-sense gun laws, Watts added. Now, we all know that the NRA has been in the headlines lately for a series of scandals and political favors. Its leadership is enmeshed in a series of lawsuits and allegations of misappropriation of donor funds, such as Wayne LaPierre's $250,000 spending spree on fancy suits. Meanwhile, the newly elected NRA president, Carolyn Meadows, was widely criticized for a recent racist remark about Representative Lucy McBath of Georgia. Meadows claimed the congresswoman won her election because she was a minority female. Lucy McBath, whose son was killed in the parking lot because some idiot white guy thought that his music was being played too loud. High school kid shot dead by this guy, and then he and his girlfriend, fiance, whatever she was, went to a motel and had burgers and pizza and watched it on the news. But she won. Lucy McBath won because she's a minority female. Those embarrassments follow a year in which many of the NRA's chosen candidates lost their races in the midterm election, while investigations were opened into the organization for accepting foreign donations, and the NRA even had a Russian spy in its midst. sending its most ravenous and unhinged supporters after a mother trying to make the country safer isn't the best look. But it is the path the NRA has unmistakably chosen. Emily Singer of Share Blue Media brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Members of Congress currently earn $174,000 a year, which is more than 2.5 times the median household income in the United States. But House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy says that's not enough for members of Congress to live on, and it's been too long since their last pay increase. It's been more than a decade, McCarthy complained to NBC News. I've got members who are leaving over this. But McCarthy doesn't have the same sympathy for other Americans who have not received pay raises in a decade. For example, the federal minimum wage has stood at $7.25 an hour since July of 2009. Almost a full 10 years ago. That means the annual earnings of a full-time minimum wage worker are just $15,080, nearly 12 times less than a member of Congress's salary. But McCarthy has condemned any Democratic efforts to increase the federal minimum wage. Back in 2013, when then-President Barack Obama called for the federal minimum wage to rise to $9 an hour, McCarthy said the modest wage bump would take away from the economy. Yeah, anytime you give somebody something, that means you're taking it from somebody else. That's how these people think. It's not the first time a Republican member of Congress has made a tone-deaf complaint about member salaries. Sean Duffy, remember him? Back in 2011, he was a repug from Wisconsin. He lamented to a constituent that he could only drive a used minivan on his $174K salary. Also back in 2011, now former Rep. Steve Sutherland, a repug of Florida, said the $174,000 was not so much. And in 2017, now former GOP Rep. Jason Chaffetz of Utah wanted members of Congress to receive a $30,000 stipend to pay rent in D.C. so that members could have, quote, at least a decent quality of life in Washington. Well, of course, Chaffetz ultimately resigned his seat and took a job at Fox, where he gets paid handsomely to spew Republican conspiracy theories. Some Democrats are on board with an increase to congressional salaries, including House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer. Hoyer stressed that the cost of living increases are not just for members of Congress, but also congressional staffers who make far less money and who also haven't seen a cost of living increases in over a decade. Hoyer also supports increasing the minimum wage, while McCarthy does not. Ultimately, there are good reasons to increase congressional salaries, including attracting a more diverse array of staffers and members. But it's hypocritical of GOP members like McCarthy to complain about the pay for members of Congress, while at the same time fighting any efforts to boost wages for impoverished and middle-class Americans. Masha Varkiani of Think Progress brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Former Secretary of State John Kerry hit back at Donald Trump's demand that he be prosecuted for allegedly urging Iran not to call Donald Trump. Trump pressed the issue yesterday, Thursday, after insinuating to reporters that the U.S. could face a military confrontation with Iran, just like in the Gulf of Tonkin, in this reporter's opinion. The U.S. has one of the most powerful ships in the world that's loaded up, Trump said, just like in the Gulf of Tonkin. And he said that before accusing Kerry, who we all know was Secretary of State under President Barack Obama. He accused Kerry of impeding current diplomatic efforts. Specifically, Trump accused Kerry of violating the Logan Act, a federal law that bans private citizens from contacting foreign governments or their representatives on behalf of the U.S. government without authorization. Well, apparently Rudy got authorization now, didn't he? What I like to see with Iran, I like to see them call me, Trump said. You know, John Kerry speaks to them a lot. John Kerry tells them not to call. That's a violation of the Logan Act. And frankly, he should be prosecuted on that, but my people don't want to do anything that's... Only Democrats do that kind of stuff. If it were the opposite way, they'd prosecute him under the Logan Act. Trump projects so much. He's talking about Iran, and has been. He has many meetings and many phone calls, and he's telling them what to do. Well, through a spokesman, Kerry shot back, everything Trump said today is simply wrong, end of story. And that was Matt Summers in a statement. He's wrong about the facts, wrong about the law, and sadly, he's been wrong about how to use diplomacy to keep America safe. Secretary Kerry helped negotiate a nuclear agreement to solve an intractable problem. The world supported it then, supports it now. We hope Trump would focus on solving foreign policy problems for America instead of attacking his predecessors for theater. Trump has criticized Kerry for meeting with Iranian officials before and has accused him of violating the Logan Act during those meetings. Last September, Kerry said he met with Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif 3 or 4 times since leaving office. He defended those meetings, saying he's simply staying in touch with his counterparts the way other former secretaries of state have done. And Trump failed to produce any evidence that Kerry is interfering with U.S. diplomacy. And the president's accusation raises a thorny issue by implying he's had a change of heart about the Logan Act. Remember Michael Flynn? I do. Trump's foreign national security advisor? He left the administration in February of 2017 after it was revealed that he lied to investigators about meeting with Sergei Kislyak, the Russian ambassador to the U.S., before Trump officially took office. Flynn held the meeting in December of 2016 while Obama was still in office, but after Trump won, he urged the ambassador not to retaliate against new U.S. sanctions against Russia. At the time, Trump didn't seem to mind that Flynn, at the time a private citizen, had met with the Russian ambassador to discuss U.S. foreign policy, because Trump said Mike was just doing his job. He was calling countries and his counterparts. Well, if the Logan Act applies to Kerry, and again, Trump pointed to no evidence that Kerry is preventing Iran from calling U.S. officials, it would have certainly applied to Flynn as well. Well, let's get to our break, and when we come back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Corporate bosses don't talk about it in public, but among themselves, psst, They whisper excitedly about implementing a transformative AI agenda across our economy. AI stands for Artificial Intelligence, the rapidly advancing digital technology of creating thinking robots that program themselves, act on their own, and even reproduce themselves. These automatons are coming soon to a workplace near you. Not wanting to stir a preemptive rebellion by human workers, corporate chieftains avoid terms like automation of jobs, instead substituting euphemisms like digital transformation of work. Privately, however, top executives see AI as their path to windfall profits and personal enrichment by replacing whole swaths of their workforce with an automated army of cheap machines that don't demand raises, take time off, or form unions. As one prominent tech exec confided to the New York Times, AI will eliminate 40% of the world's jobs within 15 years. Some CEOs are so giddy about AI's profiteering potential that they openly admit their intentions. Take Foxconn, the Taiwanese electronics giant hailed as a job-creating savior last year by Donald Trump. It was given $3 billion in public subsidies to open a huge manufacturing plant in Wisconsin. But it's now reneging and declaring that it intends to replace 80% of its global workforce with robots within 10 years. Corporate apologists say displaced humans can be, quote, reskilled to do something else. But what? Where? When? No response. This is Jim Hightower saying executives say that the machine takeover is the march of technological progress. Hogwash. It's a choice being made by an elite group of corporate and political powers trying to impose their selfish interests over us.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Air conditioning and fans account for a full 10% of the world's electricity usage. Or, to put it another way,
it's a lot of air that you pump around.
Roland Dittmeyer, a chemical engineer at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology in Germany. Another thing that takes a lot of pumping air around, he says, carbon capture.
Because the concentration of the CO2 in air is evidently quite low.
Even though it's enough to cause climate change, it's only 400 parts per million. So he says, why not retrofit air conditioners with modules that capture carbon? Several companies already make materials that strip carbon dioxide from the air. You'd then need to convert that captured CO2 into hydrocarbons. That's an energy-intensive process. But Dittmeyer's vision is that we'd use clean, carbon-free renewable energy to power that step. Do this on a large enough scale, and you could produce significant amounts of this synthetic renewable oil. Dittmeyer and his colleagues calculated that if you outfitted the AC system of the Fair Tower, a large skyscraper in Frankfurt, with these carbon capture devices, the building's units alone could produce an estimated 15,000 barrels of synthetic oil a year. The full write-up in the journal Nature Communications is called Crowd Oil, Not Crude Oil. And if the idea gets traction, it could transform the devices that cool our homes and offices into machines that help cool the planet. Or at least stop warming it up while chilling us down. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
As the days get longer and the weather warms, people of all ages will start to spring into action. Spring is a great time to breathe fresh air, stretch your arms and legs, and get physically active outdoors. Lack of physical activity contributes to obesity, heart disease, stroke, and other chronic health conditions. Fortunately, many communities are making it easier and safer to be physically active. Neighborhoods across the country are working together to create more public spaces for walking, running, biking, and other physical activities. Adults should get at least 150 minutes of physical activity each week, and children should get 60 minutes a day. If you find it hard to walk to a local recreation center, park, or playground, learn how to make your neighborhood a place that makes healthy living easier. Visit makinghealtheasier.org for information about ways communities can change to get more people outside and moving.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Pools, water parks, and other recreational water venues are popular places to relax and stay cool, but they can be sources of serious illness. Since 2000, nearly 500 outbreaks have been reported at recreational water venues in the U.S., resulting in over 27,000 illnesses and 8 deaths. Most were caused by parasites, bacteria, viruses, or certain chemicals in the water. Parents with young children who have diarrhea should not allow their children to swim or play in the water. In addition, bathers should check the inspection scores of pools and water parks and can conduct mini inspections using test strips before getting in the water. A few simple precautions can allow you to share the fun, not the germs. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
In America, is it constitutional for elections to be decided before any votes are cast? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. A 3-judge federal district court in Cincinnati recently ruled unconstitutional that state's congressional map that Republican lawmakers had drawn up with invidious partisan intent, those are the court's words, to ensure that the outcome of elections would be determined before any votes were cast. The Ohio map, which has been in effect since 2012, yields the same results in election after election after election. The results are 12 Republicans and 4 Democrats, a 75 to 25% split, even though the actual vote is very close to even. The court noted that the map packed Democrats into as few districts as possible and then carved up Democratic cities and counties to favor Republicans. The lawmakers accomplished this with strange, squiggly, curving shapes and weird lines. But this Ohio decision and the 4 other similar federal court decisions from other states may not last until the summer. The issue of partisan gerrymandering is before the United States Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court could well decide that having congressional elections that are a mockery of democracy is not unconstitutional and is democracy enough for 2019 and 2020. We'll soon find out. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1869. At 2:47 p.m., a one-word telegram was sent from Promontory Summit, Utah. The message read simply, "Done." That understated message marked the end of one of the most incredible projects ever completed by working people in the United States, the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. The arduous work of laying the rail track across the continent was completed by a predominantly ethnic workforce. It has been estimated that workers swung hammers some 21 million times, laying the track along more than 1,100 miles. Irish workers performed the dangerous work for the Union Pacific Rail Company, building the track from the east. Chinese labor made up 3/4 of the Central Pacific crews constructing from the west. Laying the track through the Sierra Nevada mountain range meant blasting through solid granite. Chinese laborers used highly volatile nitroglycerin to make way for the railroad. On some days, the track progressed as little as just a few feet. The Central Pacific Company reported that 137 workers died on the project. Newspaper reporters claimed to have seen many, many more bodies of Chinese workers. The true death toll will never be known. Both the Irish and Chinese workers not only experienced brutal working conditions, but also had to deal with discrimination. The track also cut through territories of Native American land. The railroad encroached on this land and further accelerated the displacement of Native American people. When the final golden spike was driven into the track at Promontory Summit, the nation was forever changed. The trip across the continent, which previously would take up to 6 grueling months, had been reduced to just 2 weeks. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us at Labor History in 2.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
As of Friday, things from China will get a whole lot more expensive. For that, you can thank Donald Trump. The administration raised tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese imports just after midnight Friday morning. The tariffs went from 10% to 25%. China promised it will hit back. One business group estimates the 25% tariff on apparel imports alone would cost a family of 4 an extra $500 a year. Richard Burr, the Republican chair of the Republican-led Senate Intelligence Committee this week, issued a subpoena to Donald Trump Jr., raising the ire of many of his colleagues, including Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who had already declared the investigation case closed. Meanwhile, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi kept up her attacks on the administration, admitting that she agrees with Judiciary Chair Gerald Nadler that we are in the midst of a constitutional crisis. Donald Trump went before the press Thursday afternoon, ostensibly to talk about prescription drug prices, but as usual, he rambled on incessantly about a number of topics, including the disaster relief bill now before the House. As usual, Trump lied about the amount of aid the United States has sent to Puerto Rico in the wake of almost total devastation by a 1-2 punch of direct hits by hurricanes.
Just so you understand, we gave Puerto Rico $91 billion for the hurricane. That's the largest amount of money ever given to any state. Talking about states in Puerto Rico. A little different. $91 billion. Texas got 30. Florida got 12. Puerto Rico got $91 billion. So I think the people of Puerto Rico should really like President Trump.
After those remarks, this happened on CNN.
They didn't get $91 billion. That's the fact check on this.
Yeah, let's just start from the top line. That's not true. What the president said today, what he said last night in the Panhandle in Florida, where this is obviously a big issue, what he said repeatedly, including in closed-door lunches and closed-door meetings with Senate Republicans, the $91 billion number is not true. Period. End of story.
Let me interrupt here to say, I don't believe that particular reporter was in the room when Trump lied about this, but that was the proper follow-up to be said to his face. From the safety of the CNN studios, Phil Mattingly explained what is true.
In the wake of the hurricane, they have been allocated somewhere around $40 to $41 billion by Congress. Of that allocated money, which obviously is $50 billion less than what the president is saying it was, a little over $10 to $15 billion has actually been paid out to the island. The island has, let's make perfectly clear, has had serious fiscal issues before the hurricane. And I think that's one of the driving forces about the disagreement over this, and that's part of the frustration that White House officials have said the president has. He believes that they haven't been handling their finances well enough and therefore shouldn't be given more money. The issue is the top line number, which he often brings out a chart and shows the graph, is related to long-term projections from the Office of Management and Budget in terms of longer than a 10-year budget window, what the total cost may be in federal assistance needed in Puerto Rico given the damage they faced. It is at the heart of the current fight over a disaster aid bill. This has been stalled out now for weeks because the White House has made clear the president does not want any more money for Puerto Rico. He doesn't believe that they handle the money correctly. And Democrats have continued to fight for that money.
Chelsea Manning is out of jail for now. The former Army intelligence analyst had been locked up for about 2 months after refusing to testify to a grand jury about her disclosure of military and diplomatic secrets to WikiLeaks. Manning was released Thursday from custody in a detention center in Virginia because the grand jury has disbanded. But she could soon return to jail because she received a separate subpoena for next week while she was detained. Her attorneys say she won't testify in response to that one either. The Alabama State Senate Thursday erupted in chaos over what may become the nation's strictest abortion ban, after some Republicans hastily tried to remove the rape and incest exceptions from the bill without holding an official vote.
In favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Committee amendment is tabled. Senator Chambliss.
That was no motion. That was no motion.
There was a motion. He made a motion.
He didn't even make a motion, Mr. President.
Hold on, excuse me.
He did not make a motion.
He made a motion to table.
He did not make a motion. There was no motion for another side.
He made a motion to table.
Senator. Heck no. He didn't even make a motion.
The Human Life Protection Act, which would make it a felony for a doctor to perform an abortion, would be punishable by at least 10 years in prison. Alabama Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth admitted that the bill is a direct attempt to get Roe v. Wade overturned by the Supreme Court. Every vote matters. And finally, more Americans seem to be warming to the idea that we must impeach the president. A new Reuters Ipsos poll released Thursday shows the number who said Trump should be impeached rose 5 points to 45% since mid-April. 42% said he should not be impeached. Also on Thursday, Representatives Rashida Tlaib and Al Green delivered a flash drive with a petition urging Congress to immediately begin the impeachment of Donald Trump, signed by 10 million people. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We are all night hawks in the diner of life, folks. Indeed. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 56 degrees Fahrenheit. We will be going up to about 90, maybe 92, maybe 88. Feels like it'll be 92. So we'll see how that turns out. It's going to be a warm weekend and should have overnight lows in the mid to upper 50s. Winds are currently out of the southeast at a light and variable 1 to 2 miles per hour. And will remain so, it looks like, throughout the day and tonight, and will pick up tomorrow at 5 to 10 miles per hour, but out of the northwest. We do look like we might have some rain about Wednesday, so we'll see how that goes. We've had some forecast of rain for next week for a bit now, and we hope that we will get it. We do indeed. Grass pollen is rated at moderate. The air quality index is rated good at 28 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is high at 7. Barometric pressure locally is rising at 29.72 inches. The visibility is at 9 miles, and relative humidity is falling ever so, and it is now at 54%. So we're getting pretty dried out. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 66 and partly cloudy. Paris is 63 and raining. Rome is 74 degrees and sunny. Kiev is 65 degrees and fair. Kabul is 72 degrees and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 74 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 67 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 54 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees, mostly cloudy, with a small craft advisory on the bay and offshore. And New York is 68 degrees and partly cloudy. And that's in Fahrenheit, partly cloudy, by the way. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Carolina Marcello of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Corrupt Brazilian lawmakers, corrupt in this reporter's opinion, dealt a blow to the country's graft-busting Justice Minister Sergio Moro yesterday, Thursday, when a congressional committee voted to transfer a key tool for monitoring financial transactions to the recently formed Economy Ministry. The lawmakers also voted to reverse Bolsonaro's decree giving the Agriculture Ministry power to define tribal lands and removing the country's Indigenous Affairs Agency from the Justice Ministry. The changes, which must still be ratified by the full lower house of Congress and then the Senate, are seen as a setback to the government and particularly to Moro, who has declared war on the country's culture of political graft and impunity. Moro has met with antagonism from the country's political elite, many of whom the former federal judge jailed when he led the sweeping 5-year political corruption probe known as the Car Wash. When he became Justice Minister this year, Moro pushed to transfer the Council for Financial Activities Control, which flags suspicious funds moving through Brazil's banking system for review by law enforcement officials, into the Justice Ministry. However, a joint committee comprised of lawmakers from the Senate and lower house voted to return that Financial Activities Control to the Economy Ministry, which Bolsonaro created to replace the Finance Ministry by a vote of 14-11. Moro had argued that placing the COAF under the umbrella of the Justice Ministry was crucial for fulfilling Bolsonaro's vow to end years of political graft. But the move alarmed some lawmakers, many of whom are under investigation on suspicion of corruption. Critics argue that moving the COAF to the Justice Ministry represented a potentially dangerous coalition of authority under Moro. The Congressional Committee also voted to remove powers the government gave itself to supervise and monitor tens of thousands of non-governmental organizations, including foreign ones that Bolsonaro warned were interfering in Brazil. Then the Agricultural Ministry declined to comment, and the Justice Ministry did not reply to a request for comment.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Venezuelan opposition lawmaker Americo de Gracia entered the Italian embassy on Caracas yesterday, Thursday, after a pro-government legislative body stripped him of parliamentary immunity. I thank Italy for the welcome, de Gracia wrote on Twitter, though he did not say he had taken refuge in the embassy, and he did not respond to a phone call seeking comment. Lawmaker Marianella Maganellis, who also had her immunity taken away this week, sought refuge in the Italian embassy on Wednesday. And that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and for the week. But you know Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. We'll meet up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.